Saquon Barkley is looking to repeat as a running back one overall, while Jalen Hurts gets to continue reaping the benefits of the tush push. We dig into the top three storylines for the Philadelphia Eagles entering the 2025 season on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We are going to continue our series of going through all 32 NFL teams and their top three storylines for fantasy entering the 2025 season. And this week, we're going to be hitting on all of the NFC East teams, starting with the reigning Super Bowl champion, the Philadelphia Eagles. And I mean, this team has some key fantasy assets, right? And not a lot else of like lower guys. It's all really top 20 guys, starting right at the top here with Saquon Barkley, who finished as the running back one overall last year. And, you know, he's a possibility to go 101 in most drafts this season. We have Jalen Hurts, who has been nothing but absolutely consistent over the last few seasons for fantasy football. And we got news that the tush push is allowed. They did not ban it. And that is huge when it comes to Jalen Hurts and his fantasy potential. So we'll talk about that. And then, of course, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. The Eagles just did not have to pass all that much last year, which kind of brought down their value a little bit. But will they be passing more this year with a tougher schedule? These are all things we have to dig into. Let's start with Saquon Barkley. Vinny, do you believe he should be the 101 of 2025 fantasy drafts? Right now, his rank is the 102, just behind Jamar Chase. So he is going as the top running back off the board. But consensus right now has Chase going 101. Do you think it should be Barkley instead? Or do you even think he should be the top running back off the board this year?
Well, I think there's a case to be made that he should be the 101 and can repeat. And we've seen some backs do that and be reliable. And really, all the good things are still there in Philadelphia. We did lose Kellen Moore. They did replace him with Kevin Patula, who was, by the way, their passing game coordinator. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But they did stay in house to try to get the offense rolling. But last time they did that as well when they moved on from Shane Steichen and things didn't work all that great working in-house, right? You just play caller is a little bit different. When you get promoted to that spot, you really have to be on it all the time. Every game, learning the right mix of plays and right balance with your skill position players. So that's one thing we're going to look at with Barkley. Are they going to run as much? That's number one. But history just kind of works against the back with such a high workload. I mean, it's not just the guy that finished one, it's some guys that have just taken a toll, right? I mean, Christian McCaffrey is able to do the rare feat of going back-to-back years as the number one back. I mean, that's just very hard to do. And part of what Christian McCaffrey could do is that he can get his work done in the passing game, right? If you go back to Marshall Faulk, that also helped him in back-to-back seasons produce big time. And that's kind of the ticket, right? If you're not taking that high volume. But we know Saquon had a high volume. It was very similar season to what we saw from Jonathan Taylor a few years ago. He went from the running back 2 on the board in the end behind Derrick Henry to 24. We saw Derrick Henry in that same year slip from 1 to 3. Then you had Austin Eckler. We know it dropped off precipitously for him. He went from 1 to 23, and then he was out of the Chargers the following year and was with the Commanders last year. And we know what happened to McCaffrey last year, had the injury attrition after that big high-volume year with the 49ers, fell all the way down to the 30th running back on average in fantasy and just really missed a lot of games. We had Josh Jacobs do something similar just a couple of years ago. He went from the running back 4 on the board after getting the highest volume in the league and then turned around and finished 18th. And just like Eckler, a year later, he was on a different team with the Packers. So am I saying you can read into all this a little bit and say that it's really hard to repeat as a top back on the board? Yeah, because again, any season you could battle attrition. You need a lot of things to fall into place. You need to stay healthy. You need to get the ball enough. So does the environment in Philadelphia say that could absolutely happen for Barkley? Yes. I think you have to just go with the personal preference here. Because again, history shows you're not going to get that exact value from that player. It's just not going to happen. Where in more times than not, it's not one is one again, right? You should have had him last year when he was a great value and you didn't have to take him at one, and then somebody else could give you that return this year. So we've been looking at Bijan Robinson. I think it stops there with him and Jamar Chase, Michelle. I think that's it for me if I'm debating who's going to be the 101, because again, Jahmyr Gibbs is there, but he's still a split guy where these three guys are going to see massive volume, both as a runner and a receiver here in Chase's case.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things to worry about Saquon at the 101. I mean, just the efficiency he had last year, 6 carries of over 50 yards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And 4 of those were touchdowns. That's double the number of anyone else had last year. No one else had more than 3 carries of 50 yards. Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry were at 3, and no one else had more than 2 such touchdowns. So right there, regression says like that can't keep happening. That would just be wild for those to just keep popping off like that. But then also, he was the running back 1 overall last year. That's great. But when you compare it to other running back 1 overall seasons, it's not at the top. It's actually the 8th highest points per game since 2018 in terms of running back season. So like Christian McCaffrey, when he was the running back 1 in 2019, he was averaging 25.8 points per game. Saquon Barkley's at 21.2 last year. Again, if he does that at the 101, you take him, you're going to be happy. But we're already talking about he could regress. And the season he had last year wasn't that insane of one where it's like he has to be the definite 101 because of what he showed. And we've seen him also have a season like this back in 2018, and he came back to life from 2019 to 2023 before breaking out again. Now he's not stuck with the Giants, so it should still be fine as long as he stays healthy. But then also, we're going to talk about the tush push that hasn't been banned. So expecting his rushing touchdowns to increase. He had 13 last year. Maybe it can. Jalen Hurts took a lot, but he's always going to take a lot. And the age and the health. This is the first year he's stayed healthy in a long time. There's just quite a few things where you're nervous, where if I got him in the middle of the first round, I'm going to be pumped. I just don't think I could pull the trigger at the 101, 102. I guess 103 is when you start thinking about it, because I want Chase or Bijan Robinson over him. And then it gets really close. Like, are you taking Jahmyr Gibbs or Saquon Barkley?
Yeah, I think I'm taking Saquon only because of the volume guarantee over David Montgomery, where there's still nobody really there. I know they've mixed up their backfield with Kenneth Gainwell leaving and kind of seeing if Will Shipley can have a bigger role. So we'll see, but there's still no one that can compete for the key touches the way Montgomery can cut into Gibbs in Detroit. So that's where I might cut it off. But here's really the breakdown. Is Saquon Barkley a bad pick at 101? No, he's not a bad pick. Is there a better pick? Yeah, I think it's the field, right? I mean, if you believe that Bijan Robinson has a better environment, or even Gibbs, even though I broke him down a different way, or Jamar Chase, like, I think it's okay to go that way, because chances are you're going to be right if you don't take Saquon Barkley, that you'll end up with the top scorer in fantasy in 2025. So again, each case is different, and Barkley could just be insane and superhuman and deliver again in this offense, but things just don't repeat itself, especially with all these variables we've talked about, including the extra workload. The tush push is still in play for Jalen Hurts to steal touchdowns. This team figures to pass a little bit more this season with the schedule. We had the passing game coordinator taking over, so you want to open it up for Jalen Hurts a little bit more to create some more dynamic plays. And again, Saquon Barkley is also a very high ceiling player, but he goes from game to game, carry to carry. You don't know what you're going to get. And everything lined up, as Michelle said, the long runs, the big games, the health. Is all that going to fall into place? I'm not so sure. And that makes me a little bit nervous. Again, if you want to do that, I personally wouldn't. Michelle would not. But just letting you know all these things that are working against Saquon Barkley here.
And we didn't even mention the targets. This is what we were worried about last year going into the 2024 season with Jalen Hurts, right? And he did have a career low in targets in a season that he played more than 2 games. And it was by a big chunk. Like, he only had 43 targets last year. That is very, very low for Saquon Barkley. That's just low for a running back in general when you're taking, especially when you're taking him at the 101 or thinking about him in the top 3 picks. So he's going to have to score the touchdowns. He's going to have to break off the long runs, and they're going to have to keep running at the rate they did last year, the Eagles do, because they threw the fewest by far last year. They had an easier schedule. Now they have the hardest schedule in the league. You would expect them to have to pass more. And that's why we're going to get into what Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith can do this upcoming season, because I do think they'll be more passing. So let's get into those next two storylines right after we hear from one of our sponsors.
All right, this episode of Locked On Fantasy Football, as we said at the top, is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Now it's an exciting time here as we go forward, and we're almost there to the NBA Finals, but we still have an exciting, maybe a series that is reemerged here in the Eastern Conference. It doesn't look so good on the other side with the Thunder taking a 3-1 lead, but Knicks have a shot here to even the series in Indiana. Actually, the spread is not that big in favor of the Pacers tonight. It's 2.5. So you can play with that number as much as you want there. Will the Knicks pull it off again, take care of that small number, and even the series, or do you want to go with the Pacers side? Well, you can decide, because FanDuel Sportsbook is going to set it up for you with every night delivering highlight-worthy performances in the NBA, major momentum shifts, can't miss moments. You want to get in on this action and be right there, part of the excitement. Game-winning shots, breakout players. It's never a better time to get in on the action. It's easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. You can always add more action there with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. They even have a superstar one that you can look at involving Tyrese Halliburton and Jalen Brunson, what they're doing with their scoring and assists. So all kinds of ways to play, from straight up bets to parlays. If you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If you win, you would get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment with more, win more, and be more for you with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue the show. Now, if we think Saquon Barkley might have a bit of a scoring regression, does this mean good things for Jalen Hurts? So let's look at it. I mean, he's just very solid year in and year out. I mean, he's QB5 last year in average scoring, QB2 before then. He was the QB1 before then, the QB6 before then. So this guy just produces. He has a high floor. He's one of the picks that you target at quarterback. But the question is, where should you target him? I mean, there's all these other guys buzzing, right? So you got Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, then the pocket guys, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield. Where does Jalen Hurts kind of fit in this mix to you, Michelle?
Yeah, when you look at his ranking behind Josh Allen, Lamar, and Jaden Daniels, it's like, okay, I think that's super, super fair. And then you look at his overall, where he's going 38th overall pick. Well, Josh Allen is going 24th. So right there at the top, the bottom of the second round, at the top of the third. Lamar Jackson right there at the top of the third. You have to take him. And then Jaden Daniels somewhere in the third round. And if you get to wait for Jalen Hurts in the top of the fourth, I do think that maybe he is the best value that you can go with out of these like elite guys, because of how consistent he is. And you don't have to worry about the passing touchdowns, like, at all. He had 18 passing touchdowns last year. That's it. And he was still the quarterback 5. And the first few weeks were not good for him. It started slow. After week 5 bye is really when this Eagles offense completely opened up. And remember, he was missing A.J. Brown for a span of time in the beginning there, from weeks 2 through 5 or 2 through 4, I guess, before the week 5 bye, and missing Devonta Smith for a little bit too. But from week 6 after the bye on through the Super Bowl, he was averaging 24.3 fantasy points per game. So right back to just being absolutely elite. He's, since over the last 3 seasons, he's the quarterback 2 in average scoring, behind only Josh Allen, right there with right above Lamar Jackson. But he's been incredibly consistent with big games too. He has 30 games with at least 20 fantasy points over the last 3 seasons. Only Josh Allen has more. And like, it's not so. It goes Josh Allen at 35 such games, Jalen Hurts at 30, Lamar Jackson at 27, and then fourth most is Joe Burrow at 19. So he has 11 more 20-plus point fantasy point games since 2022 than Joe Burrow. I'm absolutely fine with taking him in the 4th round. I think his value is fair, and he's so safe to take.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing you look at with Jalen Hurts. I've had him a couple times in the past few seasons on teams, and Not surprising. Those teams have been very successful and won a lot of games and won a championship, one got to the finals. So Jalen Hurts gives you that stability that you're looking for. And when you have Hurts and you just see that every week he's going to get his, no matter what happens in the game. Oh, he's going to find a way to run to the end zone. Yeah, that's going to happen. He's going to find a way to make a big play to one of these receivers. Yeah, that's going to happen, right? They just happen. Even if the start is slow in a game or in a part of the season, he's going to get rolling and deliver for you. So really it comes down to, I guess it's a little bit different, right? Saquon Barkley is the ceiling play. If you're going to swing for the fences at running back, you might go there, and that would be a bit risky. But with Jalen Hurts, if you want to like avoid that risk and say, look, I know what I'm going to get from him. There's no variables that I need to worry about too much. In fact, the variables play into his favor, right? With the passing game coordinator taking over, the schedule being tougher, where they're going to have to put up more points, may not be in control of a lot of games. The defense is going to be challenged a lot more against a lot of these elite opponents. So that would say Jalen Hurts, actually, the numbers favor him doing more. Now, the question is, do they favor him enough where you're going to feel comfortable to also like his ceiling, right? Then you're looking at Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson's the consensus number one right now. I mean, how could he not be? Because he's kind of blended those things perfectly, the passing touchdowns and the rushing touchdowns. Well, we've seen Josh Allen, a little bit of change in that offense, not as dynamic, but he's also a bit touchdown dependent. So there's that, right? But I think Jalen Hurts is less of that. Like he's not needing to run as much. So I think I look at Hurts maybe being a better value than Allen. I think if you want to play the ceiling, then you would look at Jaden Daniels, right? If it's Daniels versus Hurts, you might go there. But I don't think he can drop anything below QB5. That's the absolute worst because you know you're going to get that scoring on the very least, right? So I think it's great for him. And if the Tush Push had been banned, I'd be like, ugh, he's not going to get a lot of those cheapy touchdowns as much. And we might be like, okay, we might see if he's going to drop more. But I think I might want to bump him there right behind Lamar Jackson. So I think it's really personal preference, safe ceiling play, or like you want to go and say, hey, do I want to just also get a player that's going to be a safe floor? And I think this is both of those things in the best of both worlds.
Yeah, as long as Hurts ends up still like the last pick guy out of this top group of these five of Allen, Lamar, and Jaden Daniels, or I guess out of those four, I'm fine, with going with any of those four. Absolutely. I think they all have high ceilings. They all have safe floors. And, whoever's the cheapest, I'm okay with. And you brought up the Tush Push again. Like, yeah, if they banned that, that would have been totally something we had to consider moving him down quite a bit because I mean, Jalen Hurts, anytime they get to the 1 yard line, it's going to Jalen Hurts. And last year he had 15 carries at the 1 yard line or closer last year. And no other player had more than 10 in the NFL. He had 11 touchdowns from within the 1 yard line. No other player had more than 6. So yes, it's massive. And we can't say that this can't continue because it happens every single year. That's their plan. This is why they fought so hard for the Tush Push to stay not banned. They're still planning on using it. So yes, as long, I don't care who I get out of this group and Allen, Lamar, Daniels, or Hurts if I'm going with a quarterback early, but I want it to be one of those guys and whoever the latest one is. And if I don't get one of them, I probably will just wait till later in the draft and go with someone else that I feel comfortable with, like a Caleb Williams that I think has a high ceiling. But that we have to discuss Jalen Hurts' top 2 targets, and that's A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. Both of them felt disappointing last year, but they also both finished as top 17 wide receivers on average, right? And that's with Hurts having very few pass attempts and the Eagles having the fewest pass attempts in the league. So if we do expect that to increase, we have to figure out, are they worth their current draft cost? We'll get to that to finish today's episode. All right, let's finish up today's show talking through the top 3 storylines for the Philadelphia Eagles. And of course, we need to talk about these wide receivers. I want to know, who is the better value in drafts right now? Is it A.J. Brown or is it Devonta Smith? A.J. Brown sitting as a wide receiver 9 in consensus ranking, 17th overall pick on average. So second round pick, right? Kind of in the beginning of that second round. And then Devonta Smith is sitting there at wide receiver 24 rank, 51st overall. You can get him in the 4th, 5th round. And they did not finish all that different last year. A.J. Brown finished as a wide receiver 13 on average, while Devonta Smith was the wide receiver 17 on average. Brown with 14.1 points per game, Smith with 12.7. So right now, Vinny, if you're looking at this, who would you prefer to take the chance on next year? Is it A.J. Brown earlier in the draft, or would you prefer just to wait a couple rounds and go with Devonta Smith?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think the one thing I look at with AJ Brown, he's a little bit more reliable to get those touchdowns. If we're trusting Jalen Hurts a bit in the passing game, and then if he's going to run the ball in, his other big source of touchdowns is AJ Brown. Devonta Smith needs a little bit more big play juice, get them out of the red zone sometimes and hit on those long passes for touchdowns. And that'll be nice. I mean, that's why he makes up for a lot of his points, right? And that's why they were so close in scoring, because he makes the big plays that are chunk yards and really just gets you there with less targets and less kind of high leverage targets. Well, AJ Brown, I know, gets the high leverage targets. They look to him in the red zone, and look, he pouts every time he doesn't get the ball. And one interesting thing I will say that when all these guys have been on the field together, Smith and Hurts and Barkley and Brown, this team has been unbeatable. Like, they just don't lose when all those guys are on the field with their offense. So if they have the preference of doing something, I think they would want to get the ball in the hands of AJ Brown. He's clearly their number one. There's no doubt about it. The thing that makes it interesting for Smith is they don't really have a consistent number three. Dallas Goedert may be nearing the end too as a starting tight end for them. So when we look at that, I think that helps Devonta Smith's numbers. But if you want that consistency, I think you just have to go up and get Brown. I think Devonta Smith can be helpful, but it's more, I think, set it and forget it. You might have games where he has one catch for 20 yards because they don't need him. And another game could be like 3 for 150 and 2. You just have to live with that a little bit with the volatility. So with AJ Brown, I think he's not going to go like more than one bad game because he's going to tell his quarterback, his offensive coordinator about it. They're going to overcorrect in the next game. And if people single cover the Eagles, he just destroys them. Like, I don't know why anybody would do that, but a lot of teams do, and bad teams do, and fall into the trap. And he just destroys that, right? He can catch the ball over everyone. He can blow by everyone, and he's got the size and speed where I think Devonta Smith tends to do better in those zone games where they got to work in the middle of the field and they try to take away what AJ Brown can do. But I think he has a better skill set overall, better touchdown potential, better yardage downfield potential. So, yeah, I think when you look at it, it's not too far a drop off of where you might draft him to go there. Well, I think Devonta Smith, again, is probably going to get you exactly what you think later as a kind of a borderline wide receiver 2-1, right? That's what you're looking at with him.
Yeah, I'm on you on the AJ Brown side. Both guys, honestly, I was going to say Devonta Smith, you know exactly what you're going to get from him, but you pretty much do with AJ Brown too. So
Yeah.
with Devonta Smith, you know you're going to get around 12 fantasy points per game and half PPR. That's just where he's going to end. He's going to end somewhere in the teens, lower teens as a fantasy wide receiver. But like you said, it's going to be up and down games. He's going to have his big games. He's going to have his games where he disappears. With AJ Brown, he's going to finish between 14 and 15 points. That's what he's done pretty much his entire career, especially over the last 4 years. And that's definitely, up there with the top guys. And last season, as I mentioned, the Eagles only had 448 pass attempts. That's 30 fewer pass attempts than any other team in the league, with Baltimore being the next fewest. And one of 4 teams without 510 pass attempts. Again, they had 448. So 60 fewer than the team that threw the 5th most in the league. So that really should increase they have the hardest schedule in the league this season. It's going to be a lot different than last year. And when AJ Brown saw at least 8 targets last season, he averaged 18.2 points per game. I mean, he just needs the targets. And last season we saw him just averaging 7.5 targets per game. While in 2023, it was 9.3. There's a lot of room for increase in targets. And even in 2022, his first season with the Eagles, it was at 8.5. So we should definitely expect his targets to increase back forward. And when you're looking at his ranking, I actually think it's super fair because he's wide receiver 9 right now. The only guys ahead of him are Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Lamb, Puka Nacua, St. Brown, Neighbors, Collins, and Brian Thomas Jr. And then right after AJ Brown is Drake London and Lam McConkey and Jackson Smith-Njigba, T. Higgins. I think that's the perfect ranking for him, because I would prefer him over all those guys I mentioned after. But then the other guys like Collins and Neighbors and Brian Thomas, they are kind of more enticing just to see, like, can they be wide receiver ones, right? And the wide receiver one overall, where AJ Brown, you're probably not going to get that from him playing with the Eagles, a lower passing offense with Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the passing touchdowns were down for Jalen Hurts. You mentioned that they might pass more this season, and that also means a little bit more downfield play. If that's all the case, Brown, it comes down to the Brown touchdowns versus Smith getting the extra yardage, right? And when you think about that, what do we say? The touchdowns are a nice shortcut to producing, because the touchdown is a 60-yard catch. I mean, that's what it is in standard leagues. It's almost equivalent if you're doing half point PPR to get you that, because you're going to get a catch there, right? So it's basically a 60-yard play in a short period of time. And if you get a 60-yard touchdown of it, you're doubling up on there. And I think there's a chance that A.J. Brown can deliver those as well. So he's not just the red zone big body guy. He can also stretch the field and make some plays. So again, Devonta Smith is what you see is what you get. I think AJ Brown still could tap in a little bit more ceiling based on how many times he scores. So that's why I lean towards AJ Brown being the better value. And again, I'm going to be eyeing in a lot of leagues because people might be down a Hurts Brown stack for season long. I think there's a very strong possibility that you can pull that off and feel really good about it all season long.
Yeah, there's a possibility you can grab a good running back at the back of the first round, take AJ Brown in the second, and then go and take Jalen Hurts in the fourth. And you could be starting with a really pretty team. But that will be it for today's episode about the Eagles. Tomorrow, we will be discussing the top 3 storylines for the Dallas Cowboys. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Bye, y'all.